Hello and welcome to the Federal. This is Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, your guest for the program Off the Beaten Track. An extremely damning report into the Adani Group by the US-based short-selling firm, the Hindenburg Research, has snowballed into an unprecedented stock market situation that India has never seen before. While the truth behind charges and refutations and counter charges will take time to be known, millions of Indians are shaken at billions of rupees being wiped off the market value of the Adani Group's listed companies. The Adani Group had become interwoven with India's growth story in recent years. So how New Delhi reacts will be keenly tracked by foreign investors and even in India. Their perception of subsequent developments and responses may well be a factor in assessing the country's continuing attractiveness. To make sense of these astounding developments, I am joined by Hemindra Hazari. He is a SEBI-registered independent research analyst with experience in the Indian capital market for over a quarter of a century. After having worked with prominent foreign and domestic capital market firms, he is now a familiar face in the Indian media. He is known for being fearless while taking positions that are against the consensus. Welcome to the program, Hemindra Hazari, and thank you for sparing your time from a very packed schedule. My first question to you is that when the report of the Hindenburg Research came out, very preliminary question, that when you read that first report, what were your first thoughts? Let us try to walk through your responses.
See, whenever you read any report or you read an article, the first thing you have to ask yourself, is it convincing? Do you believe in the argument? Now, how, if you do not know much about the subject matter, how do you determine that this is a credible report?
Right.
Now, in my experience, the most specifics that are provided in any article or in any report, and those specifics are backed by authentic documentation, gives the report credibility. Then we come to whether the inference from that data is plausible, because you can come to two different conclusions with the interpretation of the data. Now, in my opinion, after going through the Hindenburg report, and as a research analyst, I found the report to be credible because it was dealing with very specific allegations. It was supported by documentation. That documentation either were extracts from investigative agencies like the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence reports, or some other, investigating. When I say investigative agents, these are investigative agency reports. Also from the company's own disclosure. So the facts there were not in question at all. Then we come to the interpretation. I found the interpretation of the research analyst at Hindenburg to be credible, in that I could also see their line of argument and their line of thinking. So to me, overall, it was a credible report.
They have made several charges, as many as 88 charges were listed. Now, we are not going to try to go through 88 charges, because then it is going to possibly spend hours together. But would it be possible to categorize them into various groups? What are the kind of charges that were there? Just for the lay viewer trying to get sense of what is an extremely dense subject.
See, broadly, there were three issues that the Hindenburg report addressed and highlighted. One was the allegation of stock manipulation. That means the market, you were influencing the market in putting an improper price, which was not really market determined. The second was accounting fraud as the allegation. And the third was the improper use of tax havens to essentially launder money. So one does not know the origins of this money, and that money was deployed from entities outside the company, although the allegation was that those entities were effectively controlled by the founders of Adani, and those funds were coming into these Adani companies which were listed, as well as they were going up. Now, when such funds come in and out, it can distort the financial statements. Like it can come in as some form of revenue and therefore inflate profits when actually it is not revenue. So these are the ways, in very layman terms, that you can distort the financial statements of these companies which are listed and therefore influence their valuation on the stock exchange. So broadly, these three areas where the hidden report, highlighted.
Right. I understand. I was also actually very keenly looking at the various Twitter feeds, the tweets which you put out on this particular issue, besides, of course, retweeting a lot of other material which was being put. Now, one of the first comments where you took an editorial position, if you can actually said so, was just a few words: "Lo, behold the power of research," which means that, according to you, the Hindenburg report, as you said, was a well-researched document. Would you agree with this?
Oh, most certainly. I would also like to add, as a research analyst, it is my duty to provide an opinion. Right. Opinion must be supported by logic and by facts. There's no point in me just repeating facts already there in the public domain. Right. As an analyst, as a commentator, I must have an opinion. There is no point in me sitting on the fence, and I rather take an opinion where I would be wrong than sit on the fence.
Right. That's well said. Now, after these charges were made in the Hindenburg report, after some time, probably more than a day, the Adani Group came out with refutations. And then this was followed by the Hindenburg, once again coming by counter charges. Now, let us walk through the refutations first, then we will take the counter charges. So what is your assessment of the refutations? Hindenburg says that there were hardly any refutations. What is your assessment as a researcher, looking at what the reply which Adani Group gave?
See, broadly, and I think all people interested in this should examine the material, which is the Hindenburg report, the Adani response to the Hindenburg report, and again, the Hindenburg rebuttal of the response. So you can also form your own opinion, but I think it's very important. My assessment was the way Adani's responded. Firstly, they said much of what is said in the Hindenburg report was already in the public domain, which is again correct, because a lot of this material has been in the public domain. So what they are trying to allude to is that, there's nothing really new what the Hindenburg report is saying. The second line of rebuttal was that you have alleged, the Hindenburg report has alleged that we have been doing a lot of acts which have been investigated by criminal agencies. So here, the Adani response was, most of these allegations have been looked at by the investigative agencies. Certain courts of law has gone to court, and in most of the cases, courts and the agencies have either closed the case or have said that the company is not guilty of those charges. However, there are also some cases which are currently ongoing. So the second point was, why should you really care? Because the criminal agencies and the proper legal authorities in India have already cleared us. Right? The third was, which is a very interesting tactic, is that, when you want to dispute a very factually based specific report, you try to find a mistake in one of the charges and you harp on that. Because if you are able to prove that in one of the mistake, you can therefore show there's a lack of credibility with the entire report. So
Right.
they have found one such example where they said Hindenburg had accused us of ciphering of something about $1 billion. But while the facts were correct, the interpretation was that this was really a bad debt which they had taken over from another company. And
Right.
the original debt was there on the books, no doubt. But in the bankruptcy court, that debt was written off. So
Right.
on this, I believe, and I think that Adani has made, I think their Hindenburg report on this particular chart has made a mistake.
Made an error, made a mistake.
Yeah. So it should not have happened, but I think it did, and they slipped. Although they said that the Hindenburg report, deliberately did it. So I think on this one instant, they have caught them, but they were not able to do the same with all the other charges, in my opinion.
Right.
They also said that on certain small matters, they tried to deflect the argument. Like some of the charges were that, they had a constant churn of the chief financial officer. Now, in any company where there's a constant churn in the chief financial officer, it is not a very healthy sign. Because the chief financial officer, his main responsibility is the integrity of the company's accounts.
Right.
Now, if there is a churn in the CFO, it would mean that there is a problem with the accounts, and that's why the CFOs were not comfortable. How they replied was that, see, these people, most of them have not left the group. They have been transferred to other areas in the group, and that is what a organization must do to groom leaders in various other responsibilities, but they should be given a chance for their own career development. So that also was a kind of a rational argument. But I think on the critical arguments that you have these companies which are actually linked to the Adanis, but they operate as independent agencies.
Right.
The money that flow from there into the company and distort the finances, in my opinion, the Adanis were unable to convince me as an analyst that their interpretation was the right one. Yes.
Yeah, I'm saying that this is your opinion, and now the Hindenburg gave a counter refutation to the Adani Group's refutation. What will you walk us through what Hindenburg said in the third instance?
According to the Hindenburg, that most of the questions that they had asked the company, they have been unable to refute or even engage in those specific questions.
Right.
Instead, they have wrapped themselves in the national Indian flag, and basically by doing so, they are indicating and they are brazenly saying that an attack on the Adani Group is an attack on India.
Right.
So, which I think, frankly, that's a ridiculous argument to make in any kind of debate. That a private sector entity cannot wrap itself around the flag when it is not even a public sector utility company, which is not the government. And then to say that because you attacked us, you're really attacking India, to me, that's a very...
That attack does not hold.
Yes.
That argument.
So these were the areas. Now, interestingly, Hindenburg did not refute where they had caught them on that one instance. So which also made me convinced that on that one particular instant, Adani had caught them.
Right. The biggest question now is that what happens now? One, we are seeing that what is playing out in the stock market, which is a virtual free fall of the Adani Group's stock values. We really do not know where this is going to be, and I'm not going to ask you that how do you see the performance of the Adani Group's stocks over the next few weeks or days or even months maybe. But we also have the regulatory bodies of India. We also have the government of India. There would be thoughts in your mind that what are the various possibilities that can happen within India and also globally, that how is this going to be assessed, and what is going to be the response of global financial institutions?
See, one thing is very clear from the meltdown in the Adani share prices in India, as well as the meltdown in the debt market abroad.
Right.
That because there also their bond prices have crashed,
Yes.
their yields, their bonds have increased, and today their bonds are trading at 70 cents to the dollar. Now, when you're trading at 70 cents to the dollar, you're trading close to bankruptcy valuations.
Right.
The effect today, the capital markets are shut for the Adani companies.
Right.
That means for the time being, the market lacks confidence in them, and it will find it very difficult to come to the market to raise funds. Now, the issue is this. The Adani Group of companies, the kind of cash flows they generate from their existing businesses,
right,
is insufficient to finance these kind of acquisitions and the other sectors, which they operate in multi sectors, to acquire those type of assets. They constantly need external finance. That external finance can come in the form of equity and can come in the form of borrowings, debt. The debt part can come from the banking system, and it can then come from the debt market. Now, because about 5 to 6 years ago, when there's a lot of concern about the kind of lumpy corporate exposures that Indian banks had, analysts in the capital market had said that Adani Group's leverage is very high. The Indian banks have a very high exposure to that debt. So apparently the Indian banks took a call that we will not increase our exposure to the Adani Group. And if they have to seek additional borrowings, they have to go outside the banking system. Therefore, the Adani Group decided to go into the foreign debt bond markets and to raise finance there, right? So that was a strategic call that they took. Subsequently, they also took a call that we need more equity that will give us, a greater, our stakeholders will have greater confidence in us. And therefore, they also launched this follow-on public issue.
Right.
Now, the issue is today, both the equity market and the bond market is unlikely to give additional funds to the Adani's companies.
Right.
So, and at the same time, they have committed various capital expenditure programs. They have already, they bought over 2 large cement companies, which also have stable, cash flows there. Now, the issue is the Indian banks will now have to handhold them. And in Indian banks, State Bank of India has the largest exposure. So how State Bank, conveys, but now all the banks will do a risk assessment, which will again be done from scratch because the conditions have changed for the Adanis. Now, based on that, because for the timing, it will be the Indian banks today are extremely critical for the Adani Group, because the markets are effectively shut for them. Now, the Indian banks, when they do their things, they will do one or if not all of 3 things. One, because the risk, in my opinion, has increased in the Adani Group, they can either increase the interest rate on their existing loans to the Adanis, which the bond market is already signaling. The fact that the bond prices have come down and the yields have gone up, the effective borrowing cost has gone up for the Adani Group today. The second, they will say that, okay, you give us more collateral on our existing borrowing. The earlier collateral that you gave may be insufficient. The third, they will say, we are uncomfortable with our current exposure. We want to reduce it. So please give back some of our please repay some of our borrowings. Right? So these are one or if not all of these 3 things they will take. Now, which means is liquidity management of the Adanis now takes precedence over anything else. So how they manage the cash flows. So in my view, they have to really slow down their asset growth. they have to even consider divesting some of the assets that they may have acquired, because today liquidity for them is very scarce and it is at a premium. So until the markets recover, I think that will take some time, because for that you need stable prices, you need a stable share price, you need a stable bond price for a period of time. Then only market, and you can again go back to the markets and probably come out with an issue at a much lower price point. But I think until for them, liquidity management now is very critical. So on the financial strategy, this is what, in my view, they have to focus on.
Now, would you say that how the Indian banks, especially the public sector banks, how they respond to the crisis which the Adani Group is facing is to some extent, obviously, it will be determined also by the kind of political heat that is being generated. We are in the middle of the budget session of Parliament, an extremely crucial session for the government to get its important other legislations also passed. There is a fairly long wish list which the government has had. So would you say that this is actually political economy mixed together, which is actually going to have a tremendous impact on whether the Adani Group is able to safely navigate out of this crisis that it is facing?
See, this group, according to me, was always a politically sensitive group. I think that has been widely acknowledged in most of the media reports, even before this crisis. Now, very clearly today, as I said, all banks would be reviewing their entire exposure. Bank boards, that means the boards of directors, but these will be large size loans, right? Today, in my view, the board of directors of any listed bank will be reluctant to increase their exposure to Adani, given the kind of events that we have seen, right? So for them, get additional funds, because the problem is, if the bank were to give them additional funds, the bank's own stock price will get impacted. And we have seen that. We have seen that, banks like State Bank of India, LIC, for example, HDFC Life, which did to the follow-on public issue, the market has hammered their share prices. So even if they want to give, supposing they are pressurized also to give, they will not give it because their own share is affected today. So that is the dilemma they are going to have. So this is how, but to me, in my view, their banking relationship with the Indian government banks is crucial for them at this moment in time.
Right. That brings to my last question, which I have in mind for you. It's also partly taken up by you in your preceding answer, that in fact, there is one quotation, in one of the articles which appeared in an international publication, you have been quoted as saying that this, meaning, that this entire crisis, this report of the Hindenburg research has created a major risk now, not only for the Adani Group, but for the entire Indian market. This is what is exactly you are quoted for. And then Hindenburg is openly saying that your regulator is protecting the perpetrators instead of punishing them. Fairly, harsh words. Now, does this mean that the government will also have to be extremely careful about the kind of signals which emanate from it to the financial institutions in India, whether banks or insurance companies?
See, very clearly, it is a concern. Although in the allegations that they have made about the regulator protecting the perpetrator, and they've cited some source saying that, SEBI officials are corrupt. To me, those have really not been substantiated with specific information. And in any case, that's very difficult to substantiate unless you are doing it. But the way we have seen that these charges have been there for some time. One of your colleagues, Mr. Paranjoy Thakubuha Thakurta, has raised a lot of these issues. And there is also a fact that the courts have tended to agree with the Adanis and prove them innocent in a lot of these matters. Now, what is important is that even though the courts have by and large cleared the Adanis, and that has been one of their main defense against Hindenburg, the market has not recognized that. Because in the of investor opinion. They don't really go by facts. They have to take an assessment based on limited knowledge. They don't require, hard evidence. And their view is very clear that even though the Indian courts, the Indian agencies have cleared the Adanis by and large, the markets have discarded that. So when you have this situation, then I think it is very important for the government as well as in this case, the Securities and Exchange Board of India to try to come out and suit the market. Because now investors are apprehensive that if this is happening in Adani, which is, by the way, a very large conglomerate now.
Right.
The conglomerates. Because in many ways, mind you, what you're seeing in the Hindenburg report may not be an exception in the Indian corporate world.
Right. That is the biggest worry.
So far has not been uncovered in other companies.
Right.
See, because examined in detail how another company, the CG Power, imploded. And there also you're seeing this. But this is normally not available to analysts, because normally this type of information doesn't come in the public domain. See the kind of opaque companies which are linked to the founders, how they keep moving the funds in and out, and invariably through tax havens. Now, once all this comes out in a proper report, concise report, it does raise concerns that is this the practice followed in other large conglomerates in India? And what has the regulator been doing about all this? Because it is very clear that the regulator really, at least in this case, has not done anything, because probably they have the view that Adani companies have not done anything wrong. But the markets today, unfortunately, has discarded that view. So in my view, when you have such a sudden and abrupt collapse in prices, the regulator must come forth and reassure the market.
Hemindra Hazari, you have actually very categorically stated, that the Adani Group has to be held responsible for whatever charges have been made, and that the refutations have not been really very convincing. Just a small little word of clarification. In the course of the conversation, I did not interrupt you right away. You did mention the name of our fellow journalist, Paranjoy Guhathakurta. I just wanted to say that while he remains a very old friend and a professional colleague, he is not formally part of the federal in any way, does not have any professional linkages with our program. So that is just a point of clarification. Now, my last question to you is that what we are seeing is that some very substantial charges have been made against the largest Indian corporate group. It has taken a beating in the stock market. There has been a reshuffling in the pecking order as far as the numbers are concerned, both globally as well as within the country. How exactly are you seeing the roadmap ahead for the Adani Group and for the capital market within India?
See, I think one thing is the Hindenburg report has accused the Adani Group of they made certain allegations. Right. Adani Group has refuted those allegations. The capital market has discarded the Adani Group's defense. I think it is extremely important for the regulator now to step in and to inform investors what exactly is the position. Because the market can go wrong. But that is why I think it is extremely important for the regulator to step in and to say, which one of these two contestants is right. Because until we get that, always be this apprehension and overhang on the Adani companies.
Right. So to resolve that, it is the job of the regulator. And if the regulator is not moving on its own account, then it is very important for the government to apply the pressure on the regulator to step in and actually clarify the atmosphere. This is also happening in the middle of the budget session. So we can say that this is going to be a continuing and an evolving story. So we will keep on tracking this particular event. Thank you, Mr. Hemindra Hazari, for being with us and very lucidly explaining and taking us through the entire process over the last few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more interesting updates.